Chapter 8. Prestige, Dominance, and Menopause. In Into Thin Air, the author Jon Krakauer described the influence of the famed mountaineer Rob Hall at Everest Base Camp. Base Camp provides an interesting situation in which a diverse set of people have been plucked from the modern world and plopped down at 17,598 feet, where they must figure out how to organize themselves at least well enough to complete the challenging task. At the time, Hall was recognized as perhaps the best mountain climber in the world, having summited Everest more times than any other non-Sherpa climber. Krakauer sketched the scene. Base Camp bustled like an anthill. In a certain sense, Rob Hall's adventure consultants' compound served as the seat of government for the entire base camp, because nobody on the mountain commanded more respect than Hall. Whenever there was a problem, a labor dispute with the Sherpas, a medical emergency, a critical decision about climbing strategy, people trudged over to our mess tent to seek Hall's advice. And he generously dispensed his accumulated wisdom to the very rivals who were competing with him for clients. Rob Hall's ability to influence life at base camp arose from his prestige. Even in dealing with his rivals in both climbing and business, he was the first among equals. He held this position not because of any formal or official position, but because of a shared sense of respect or admiration for him among those at base camp. People sought him out and deferred to his judgments in many domains, including domains that have little to do with climbing skill per se, such as Sherpa labor disputes. Hall responded generously, which only enhanced his influence. Not long after the scene described by Krakauer, Hall froze to death on Mount Everest as he stayed behind, still high on the mountain, in an effort to save a weakened climber. Such patterns are not some peculiarity of late 20th century Westerners. The same phenomenon emerges all over the world. Consider the isolated inhabitants of the Andaman Islands, a population of egalitarian hunter-gatherers who were studied by the renowned British social anthropologist A.R. Radcliffe Brown from 1906 to 1908. Radcliffe Brown observed, "Besides the respect for seniority, there is another important factor in the regulation of social life, namely the respect for certain personal qualities. These qualities are skill in hunting and warfare, generosity and kindness, and freedom from bad temper. A man possessing them inevitably acquires a position of influence in the community. His opinion on any subject carries more weight than that of another, even older man. The younger men attach themselves to him, are anxious to please him by giving him any presents that they can, or by helping him in such work as cutting a canoe, and to join him in hunting parties or turtle expeditions. In each local group there was usually to be found one man who thus, by his influence, could control and direct others." Radcliffe Brown was describing prestige, which creates similar patterns across the globe and back in time. Great climbers and highly skilled hunters, as well as those that excel in other locally valued domains, are sought out and deferred to, and naturally emerge as influential across a wide range of domains. Such respected individuals are rarely ill-tempered or erratic, and are often renowned for their generosity. This phenomenon occurs even in societies that are highly egalitarian, possessing no formal leadership roles or hierarchy. Across human societies, prestige is consistently associated with great skill, knowledge, and success in activities or tasks people care about. This prestige status readily forms a foundation for leadership in egalitarian societies. To understand the psychology that underlies these patterns, let's examine how prestige psychology evolved in our species' lineage. The key is recognizing that once humans became good cultural learners, they needed to locate and learn from the best models. The best models are those who seem to possess the information most likely to be valuable to learners, now or later in their lives. To be effective, learners must hang around their chosen models for long periods and at crucial times. Learners also benefit if their models are willing to share non-obvious aspects of their practices, or at least not actively conceal the secrets of their success. As a consequence, humans reliably develop emotions and motivations to seek out particularly skilled, successful, and knowledgeable models, and then are willing to pay deference to those models in order to gain their cooperation, pedagogy, or at least acquiescence in cultural transmission. This deference can come in many forms, including giving assistance, for example, helping with chores, gifts and favors, for example, watching their children, as well as speaking well of them in public, thus broadcasting their prestige. Without some form of deference, prestigious individuals have little incentive to allow unrelated learners to be with them, and would not be inclined to provide any preferential access to their skills, strategies, or know-how. This patterning, as it emerged over human evolutionary history, created another opportunity for natural selection to sharpen our cultural learning abilities. When you are just learning a complex skill, it may often be difficult to distinguish a truly great performance from just a good one, or even a mediocre performance. For example, playing the violin. To solve this problem, a young or naive learner can watch other more experienced individuals to see who they pay attention to, defer to, and mimic. Our naive learner can then use this to figure out whom they should begin learning from. As we discussed in Chapter 4, this represents a kind of second-order cultural learning, in which we figure out from whom to learn by assessing who others think are worthy models. From this, prestige status is born. Individuals who receive this kind of attention, imitation, and deference are prestigious, even if they turn out not to be very knowledgeable or skilled. These cues of prestige, such as visual attention, cause learners to preferentially target their learning efforts. Individuals become increasingly prestigious as other members of their community come to believe they are worthy of respect, deference, and admiration. This occurs even if most of those who come to respect the person cannot, or do not, directly evaluate the person's success, knowledge, or skill themselves. This respect and admiration are the emotions that drive prestige deference. It's why the young Andaman Islanders would attach themselves to certain individuals, and why they would help him cut a canoe or hunt a turtle. To understand prestige as a social phenomenon, it's crucial to realize that it's often difficult to figure out what precisely makes someone successful. In modern societies, the success of a star NBA basketball player might arise from his 1. Intensive practice in the off-season, 2. Sneaker preference, 3. Sleep schedule, 4. Pre-game prayer, 5. Special vitamins, or 6. Taste for carrots. Any or all of these might increase his success. A naive learner can't tell all the causal links between an individual's practices and his success. Reference Chapter 7. As a consequence, learners often copy their chosen models broadly across many domains. Of course, learners may place more weight on domains that for one reason or other seem more causally relevant to the model's success. This copying often includes the model's personal habits or styles, as well as their goals and motivations, since these may be linked to their success. This "if in doubt, copy it" heuristic is one of the reasons why success in one domain converts to influence across a broad range of domains. The immense range of celebrity endorsements in modern societies shows the power of prestige. For example, the NBA star LeBron James, who went directly from high school to the pros, gets paid millions to endorse State Farm Insurance. Though a stunning basketball talent, it's unclear why Mr. James is qualified to recommend insurance companies. Similarly, Michael Jordan famously wore Hanes underwear, and apparently Tiger Woods drove Buicks. Beyoncé drinks Pepsi, at least in commercials. What's the connection between musical talent and sugary cola beverages? Finally, while new medical findings and public educational campaigns only gradually influence women's approach to preventive medicine, Angelina Jolie's single op-ed in the New York Times, describing her decision to get a preventive double mastectomy after learning she had the faulty BRCA1 gene, flooded clinics from the UK to New Zealand with women seeking genetic screenings for breast cancer. Thus, an unwanted evolutionary side effect, the influence of prestige across many domains, turns out to be worth millions and represents a powerful and underutilized public health tool. Having evolved alongside cultural learning in the human lineage, prestige was a latecomer to our status psychology. We humans also possess a dominance psychology, which was inherited from our primate ancestors and is thus much older than prestige. In both primates and humans, individuals attain dominant status when others fear them and believe they will use physical violence or other means of coercion if they do not receive deference in the form of appeasement displays and preferred access to mates and resources, for example, foods. In these hierarchies, subordinates signal their acceptance of a lower rank with displays involving diminutive body positions, including narrowed shoulders and a downward gaze. Dominant individuals remind subordinates of who the boss is with expansive body positions, upright torsos, widely spread limbs, and broadened chests. In some primates, high rank is achieved purely through fighting ability, which is based mostly on size and strength, though coalition partners and kinship also play a role. In chimpanzees, alliances are also often critical, as pairs or trios establish coalitions in order to secure the top spots in the dominance hierarchy. These rankings are not the unstable products of continuous fighting, but often provide a relatively stable social order that is established after periods of fierce conflict. High dominance rank in both males and females generally leads to greater reproductive success, as measured by numbers of surviving offspring. Thus, because of culture-gene coevolution, humans came to possess, at least, two quite distinct forms of social status: dominance and prestige. I'll lay out how each of these forms of status connects to quite different psychological processes, motivations, emotions, and bodily displays. However, before doing that, it's worth considering whether achieving dominance and prestige do both, in fact, favor greater reproductive fitness in small-scale societies. Reproductive fitness is the key currency that natural selection will seek to increase. If both forms of status are associated with greater fitness in these contexts, it's then at least plausible that both could have evolved genetically and been sustained over our species' evolutionary history. Unfortunately, there's very little work linking prestige and dominance to measures of fitness, in part because evolutionary researchers have typically assumed that humans have only one dimension of social status. However, Chris von Ruden and his colleagues have recently studied prestige and dominance among the Chemene in the Bolivian Amazon as part of a long-term field project. The Chemenée live in relatively independent small family groups that are now clustered in villages along rivers. They hunt, gather, and cultivate gardens scattered throughout the forest. Compared to most societies, their informal status hierarchies are relatively flat, and local leaders are weak, making this a challenging population in which to test theories about status. Chris asked a sample of Chemenée to rank the men in two villages along a number of dimensions, including their fighting ability, generosity, respect, community persuasiveness, ability to get their way, and their number of allies. Each Chemenée man could then be assigned a score based on the aggregate results from his fellow villagers. Chris argued that his measures of fighting ability and community persuasiveness provide the best proxies for dominance and prestige, respectively, in this context. He then showed that both of these proxies for social status are associated with having more babies with one's wife, having more extramarital affairs, and being more likely to remarry after a divorce, even after statistically removing the effects of age, kin group size, economic productivity, and several other factors. Beyond this, the children of prestigious men die less frequently, and prestigious men are more likely to marry at younger ages. Neither of these effects held for dominant men. These findings suggest that, at least in this small-scale society, being recognized as either dominant or prestigious has a positive influence on one's total reproductive output, children, or mating success, over and above the consequences that might accrue from factors associated with status, like economic productivity or hunting skills. Not surprisingly, both dominant and prestigious men tended to get their way at group meetings, but only prestigious men were respected and generous. Key elements of prestige and dominance. An upcoming list summarizes some of the key elements of prestige and dominance, and of the strategies used by individuals to attain and maintain each type of status. Beginning at the beginning of the list, we'll note the successful use of status-seeking strategies based on dominance or prestige leads individuals to have greater influence on their group's behavior, on its decisions, movements, and internal dynamics. This effect, combined with the fact that both dominant and prestigious individuals receive deference from lower status individuals, is what makes them both forms of social status. In dominance relationships, subordinates are influenced by the dominant out of fear. They submit or go along in order not to provoke the dominant. By contrast, because people seek out prestigious individuals due to their perceived success and skill, they become truly persuasive, such that learners often shift their underlying opinions, beliefs, and practices to be more similar to those expressed by the prestigious individual. In addition, because lower status people seek to pay deference to their chosen models in exchange for getting to be with them and learn about what they do, prestigious individuals gain influence as those with lower status seek to please them. Thus, prestigious individuals are influential both because people shift their own opinions and practices to better match those of the prestigious, and because people are inclined to go along with prestigious individuals as a form of deference, even if they themselves don't agree. The effects of prestige on attention, cultural learning, and persuasion are well established. Reference Chapter 4. To go beyond this, to explore the idea that both prestige and dominance influence group behavior, I teamed up with my colleague Jess Tracy, an emotion and social psychologist, and our then junior colleague Joey Cheng, who did all the hard work. We formed small teams of strangers and asked the teams to tackle a group challenge called the Lost on the Moon task. Imagining they had just crash-landed on the moon, each group had to rank a set of items in order of importance. The items were things like a compass, gun, signal flare, and matches. Our participants were told they would be paid according to how similar their team's rankings were to the rankings of NASA engineers. Everyone first created their own personal ranking, and then their teams were assembled to come up with the team's ranking. After this, every individual privately evaluated their fellow team members on a wide range of personal and social dimensions. From these peer ratings, we assigned each person several scores, including assessments of their prestige and dominance. Using complex statistical analyses, we showed that being either more prestigious or more dominant led to greater influence on their group's task outcome. We measured task outcomes by considering both who the participants thought were influential in determining the team's rankings, subjective assessments, and by examining whose personal rankings were most similar to their team's eventual final rankings, an objective measure. Both prestige and dominance-based strategies were clearly distinguishable, revealed the expected patterns, and provided independent routes to influencing one's group, different routes to status. Dominant individuals tended to 1. Act overbearing, 2. Credit themselves, 3. Use teasing to humiliate others, and 4. Be manipulative. Meanwhile, prestigious individuals, 1. Were self-deprecating, 2. Attributed success to the team, and 3. Told jokes. Patterns of dominance versus prestige status. Feature: influence. Dominance based on coercion and threat. Prestige: true persuasion and deferential agreement. Feature: imitation by lower status. Dominance: no imitative bias except to satisfy dominant. Prestige: preferential, automatic, and unconscious imitation, may include affiliative imitation. Feature: attention by lower status. Dominance: tracking of higher-ups, avoidance of eye contact, and no staring. Prestige: directing of attention to and gazing at higher-ups, watching and listening. Feature: sociolinguistic behavior by higher-ups. Dominance: seizure of the floor and use of aggressive verbal intimidation, for example, disparaging humor and criticism. Prestige: given the floor and permitted long pauses, uses self-deprecating humor. Feature: mimicry by lower status. Dominance: no preferential mimicry. Prestige: preferential mimicry of higher-ups. Feature: proximity management by lower status. Dominance: avoidance of higher-ups, keeping distance to avoid random aggression. Prestige: approach to higher-ups, maintenance of proximity to higher-ups. Displays. Feature: lower status. Dominance: diminutive body position, shoulder slump, crouching, and gaze aversion. Prestige: attention to prestigious, open body position. Feature: higher-ups. Dominance: expansive body position, expanded chest, wide stance, arms wide. Prestige: similar to dominance display except muted, less expansive use of space. Emotions. Feature: lower status. Dominance: fear, shame, fear-based respect. Prestige: admiration, awe, admiring respect. Feature: higher-ups. Dominance: hubristic pride, arrogance. Prestige: authentic pride, tempered arrogance. Feature: social behavior by higher-ups. Dominance: aggression, self-aggrandizement, egocentric. Prestige: pro-social, generous, and cooperative. Feature: reproductive fitness. Dominance: higher-ups have greater fitness in small-scale societies. Prestige, higher-ups have greater fitness in small-scale societies. Imitation, attention, and mimicry. Lower status individuals preferentially attend to, watch and listen to, and imitate prestigious individuals, but not dominant ones. This attention and imitation is usually automatic and unconscious. It may also include bodily mimicry that serves two separate functions. First, mimicry can be an unconscious way of showing deference, of assenting to a person's higher prestige. This works because others are watching for cues to who is being copied, so substantial mimicry can effectively boost the prestige of the person mimicked. Second, mimicry is a tool that we use to help us get into other people's minds, to understand their thoughts and preferences. For example, when two people are having a positive conversational experience, getting to know one another, they will be unconsciously mimicking each other in their body positions, vocal frequencies, movements, and facial expressions, a patterning known as the chameleon effect. Interestingly, however, since prestige subordinates are keener on understanding what their higher-ups are thinking, wanting, and believing, they engage in relatively more mimicry. That is, subordinates unconsciously mimic prestigious individuals more than vice versa. One study of vocal mimicry involved CNN's longtime talk show host, Larry King. Researchers analyzed the low-frequency vocal patterns used by King and his guests to see whether King altered his vocal patterns to match the guest, or vice versa. Prior research had established that one of the ways that conversationalists mimic each other is by syncing up their low-frequency vocal patterns. But who accommodates to whom? 25 guests were analyzed, ranging from Bill Clinton to Dan Quayle, U.S. Vice President, 1989 to 1993. As expected, when Larry was interviewing someone perceived to be highly prestigious, Larry shifted his vocal frequencies to match his guests' patterns. However, when he was interviewing those perceived to be of lower status than Larry himself, it was the guests who automatically and unconsciously shifted to match Larry's frequency. Larry most strongly accommodated to George Bush, a sitting American president, as well as to Liz Taylor, Ross Perot, Mike Wallace, and a presidential candidate, Bill Clinton. Meanwhile, Dan Quayle, Robert Strauss, and Spike Lee accommodated to Larry. Sometimes neither person shifted to match the other, such as when Larry interviewed a young Al Gore. These conversations were perceived as difficult, perhaps because both individuals saw themselves as being of higher status than their partner, so neither would defer. Part of figuring out who to learn from is attending to whom others are looking at, listening to, and emulating, because in a complex world, doing so can point us in the right direction, toward models we should be learning from. At least, this was the case for most of our species' evolutionary history. However, in the modern world, this aspect of our psychology may explain how someone can be famous for being famous, the Paris Hilton effect. The nature of our media means that, without trying, many people end up attending to whomever the popular media is covering. An initial media exposure, accidental or by design, creates attention cues that cause people to unconsciously perceive someone as a worthy model. This means that we see others consistently watching certain celebrities and hear others talking about those celebrities because such people provide a shared point of reference for everyone who watches the same media. These attention cues can cause our prestige psychology to automatically infer that these individuals are worthy of our imitation, respect, and admiration. This non-conscious inference also causes increased emulation and mimicry in this group, as they seek physical, or at least social, proximity. This shift can then create a feedback loop as the media continues to cover those who people want to know more about, and a celebrity is born, seemingly from nothing. This process got started because the initial media coverage caused some people to mistakenly infer that others were attending to a particular person. A parallel kind of runaway phenomena is described by Duncan Watts for the emergence of renowned paintings like the Mona Lisa and chart-topping popular songs. Status displays and emotions. Being or achieving high status has characteristic bodily displays that are predictable given the nature of the underlying relationships. In primates, as in many other species, high dominance rank is associated with large size. Even in humans, by 10 months, infants expect sheer size to favor success in conflicts between two agents, even if those agents are merely rectangular shapes with faces. Consequently, it's not surprising that dominants signal their status by looking large, standing upright, expanding their chests, and spreading their limbs apart. Think professional wrestlers or male baboons. Dominants also glare at others, looking for any hint of a challenge. For prestige, the displays of higher-ups appear to be muted or toned-down versions of the dominance display. These are pride displays, with the aggressive elements replaced or suppressed. This makes sense, since prestigious individuals want to signal their status, but do not want to inadvertently communicate aggression. One image shows bodily displays of newly achieved prestige after victories in an Olympic judo competition. The image pairs a status display from a congenitally blind judo competitor with that of a sighted one. Can you tell which person has never actually seen a pride display by another person? The differences between dominance and prestige displays can be seen clearly in videos we took of our teams during our Lost on the Moon task. By systematically coding the video, we found that individuals pursuing a dominant strategy, 1. occupied more space, 2. used a wider posture, and 3. positioned their arms further away from their bodies than did those pursuing prestige. Meanwhile, prestigious individuals were more inclined to tilt their heads up, expand their chests, and smile. We also found that dominant, but not prestigious, individuals lowered their vocal pitch over the course of the interaction. Focusing on emotions, psychologists have independently distinguished two forms of pride, which, though they have labeled them as hubristic pride and authentic pride, correspond closely to dominance-based pride and prestige-based pride. Hubristic pride is the affective experience of seeking or achieving high status by controlling others through force or force threat, and authentic pride arises from seeking or achieving high status through the admiration of others based on one's competence, skill, success, or know-how in valued domains. Some evidence has also begun to reveal that achieving prestige or dominance can be linked to distinct hormonal responses. Displays by lower status individuals are also distinctive. In a dominance relationship, the submissive displays of subordinates are in many ways the opposite of those made by dominant individuals. Subordinates try to look small, shrinking their bodies, postures, and presence. They also avert their gaze from dominance, though they still keep track of them to avoid random acts of aggression. Submissive displays are associated with the emotion shame. By contrast, lower status individuals in a prestige hierarchy need to approach and engage the prestigious individual, be with him or her, and actively and openly defer. Public displays of deference are particularly effective since they generate more prestige for their recipient. Aside from approach, attention, and an open body posture, this pattern is not highly distinctive, except in contrast to the other displays described earlier. The relevant emotions are admiration, awe, and respect, not based on fear.